Yo, what's going on, Epic 7 fam? I'm Sue, and in this one we'll be talking about the February 13th balance adjustment preview that was just shown earlier this morning over on Stowe. In case you're new here and you don't know how I do balance adjustment previews, what I do is I put like a little checklist on the screen for each character and artifact that I talk about with a list of things that I think the character needs, things that probably made them end up on this balance adjustment in the first place, and then you can take a look at the changes, compare and contrast, and formulate your own opinion on whether or not the changes are actually good. So, without wasting any more time, let's jump into it because there's a lot to talk about today. We're going to be talking about Fallen Cecilia, Remnant Violet, Lilius, Diane, Crow, Ludwig, Raz, and Adventurer Raz for the heroes. And for the artifacts, we have Wings of Light and Shadow. This is Ilinav's artifact, as well as Uberius' Tooth, which is Luna's original banner artifact before it was replaced with Draco Plate in 2020. Anyways, the first character we're going to be talking about is the big one, Fallen Cecilia. I put her on the thumbnail for a reason. This is my favorite mitigation knight pretty much ever. I love this character, but she's been so bad for so long, and honestly, you can definitely feel it. I've obviously put it on other balance adjustment preview thumbnails going, where the heck is the character? Especially after last summer in 2024 for the E7 WC, where she appeared alongside Numa and Luna for all of the promotional and marketing materials, and the character was just completely absent from every single game mode in Epic 7. So it's safe to say the character just does not have a niche. This character came out in the spring of 2019, and pretty much nobody really pulled for her because Crimson Armor was just a better knight that was easier to get for most players. So it was basically a skip. After Crimson Armor got nerfed in the late summer of 2019, Fallen Cecilia became the de facto best mitigation knight in the game from fall of 2019 until I want to say like early 2022. As time went on, we got similar performing knights in the mitigation role. We got buffs for characters, but it wasn't really till like Unbound Knight Arwell where she was totally eclipsed and fell out of favor as a mitigation knight, and then she was relegated to pretty much only anti-cleave. But once we got the protection set, most players realized that the 3-star Eaton was just better, and therefore there just wasn't a reason to play the character. There is a third build for this character that was popular over the years that I feel like most players have forgotten about, especially from my cursory glance online on social media about these buffs, things like Stove and whatnot, because people really seem to have forgotten this third way to play the character, and once you're aware of it, it kind of makes sense, like why I think that these buffs for the character are very good. But of course, I'm getting ahead of myself. So let's talk about the skill one first, which is Mistake. The damage dealt on it is going to be increased. Currently, it is 7% health scaling, which is kind of low. Like 8% is pretty much the low end for an actual move, so this is a good set of changes for it. And also, the soul burn is being changed to the S1 from the S3 previously. 10 souls to decrease the skill cooldown of the S3. Obviously, with the changes to the S3, we would have liked that one, but previously, it wasn't a very good soul burn. Like, you would use it to stall out a game if you were desperate, but it was pretty mediocre for a soul burn. Now, having ignores ER on a 100% chance to provoke a target for one turn is very, very strong. It allows Fallen Cecilia with enough souls to basically systematically dismantle an enemy team if she has the support to do so. So that is a pretty good change. The other change here is going to be on the S2 Strong Instinct. This is her passive that gives the barriers to her team at the start, as well as a teammate at the end of each of her turns. Now, Fallen Cecilia, bigger barriers, right, for not only the start of the fight, but the end of each turn. And she also has her max health being increased by 10% as part of her passive. So in case you don't know, Fallen Cecilia is the same base stat line as Dragon Bride Senya. So you can basically get the same level of bulk on this character that you could on that character. So yes, 40,000 HP Fallen Cecilias are on the menu with these supersized barriers. So this character is going to be absurdly tanky. Like very, very difficult for you to punch through. Like if somebody wants to go triple HP percentage right side pieces on this character, they're going to be able to do so. Like you're looking at maybe needing to chew through, like, depending on what it is, like I think it's like 18 or 20% barrier. It escapes me. I'll probably put it up on the screen once I double check it in post. But you used to get some pretty sizable barriers, right? Like a 28 or 30k Fallen Cecilia would generate like these like 2800, 3000 HP barriers. You're going to be looking at even more sizable barriers. Like it's almost like 45k HP that you're going to have to punch through on some of the tankiest versions of this character. So that's pretty insane. That pretty much, again, puts her back at the top of the totem pole when it comes to just having raw HP that your opponent is going to have to actually chew through. And that's before we talk about the changes to the imprint, as well as the S3 Spear of Resentment. So the Spear of Resentment now is an AoE strip against the opponent, and also cannot trigger a counterattack. And that can't trigger a counterattack clause is huge, because the last time Fallen Cecilia was pretty good was in the ReZero meta, like right before we got the Rem Violet one, right? That meta, around that time before we got Ran, Conquer Lilius, right? And you would press S3 with Fallen Cecilia, and it would just trigger a Violet counter, and your Fallen Cecilia would just be exposed, or the Rem counter with the AoE. Your whole team is unhealable, and it's like, why did I even press the button? So that is a very good change. But the strip is also very, very strong, especially when we talk about the imprint in a second, right? People used to already build this character super tanky, and if they were going to budget excess stats, it was either in effect resistance, so you couldn't strip the barrier super easy, or effectiveness, so that way they could provoke lock specific people. For the people that want to go back to that old effectiveness build, you now have a reason to do so. Also, the cooldown on Spear of Resentment was reduced from 5 turns to 4 turns, which is a pretty big change in my opinion. And the most insane change on the character is obviously the imprint release being changed from ER, right, for the team, to speed for the team. This puts her alongside of Green Vildred as the only character in the game with this imprint, and it is the best imprint release pretty much in the entire game, right? Everybody, myself included at high ranks, has a Green Vildred built just for the imprint in case you need it. Like, I don't even play fast most of the time, and I still have it built. It's just that impactful. Now, looking around online, people are like, well, the speed imprint, thing is not something I thought that I would want to see. But, like, what's the point? Well, the point is that there's another way that people used to play Fallen Cecilia. I believe it was popularized by AB in the Legend ranks back in the day. And that is Bruiser Fallen Cecilia. You would build 100% crit chance with like 27k HP and like maybe 1400 defense at like maybe 220, 230 speed, something like that. You'd play that stat line, and people would just be like, oh, it's a midnight, it's not that big of a deal. And then you would just use Spear of Resentment off rip, and it would do good damage because Spear of Resentment has almost the same damage multipliers as like Alencia, and you would build Fallen Cecilia at like 28k HP back when, gear's better now, but back then, like, people were building Alencia at like 21, 22k HP. So you would be getting Alencia performance with the extra HP that you had, as opposed to the critical hit damage that Alencia had. And that was really, really good. So what I'm getting at here is this is now a character that is potentially at the top of the totem pole when it comes to mitigation knights for the standard turn 2 players, because she's basically Dragon Bride Senya in terms of tankiness, is a dark unit, so not vulnerable to characters like Bystander Hua Young, is a dark unit, so synergizes incredibly well with Lone Wolf Peyra, who just came out. They increased her damage across the board. I want a move that, 1, was slightly underpowered, and 2, a move that was already on par with a good AoE health scaling DPS move. You give her the speed imprint, and if your opponent first picks Fallen Cecilia, you literally have no idea if it is a 40k HP mitigation knight, or it is a speed imprint for cleave, or it is an aggro bruiser, right? You have literally no idea. This is why I think Fallen Cecilia is probably back. I've seen people say they don't think this set of changes is very good. They literally gave this character everything and the kitchen sink. Is she broken? No. But good lord, is she like a Swiss Army knife now? Because you can play Mitt, right? You can play her as a cleave anchor that is also a speed imprint. I cannot stress this enough. This character gives you unparalleled flexibility in the draft. She is literally a pivot goddess, in my opinion, and winning the draft is literally like winning 80 to 90% of the match in Epic 7. Having a character that you can pick early in the draft that your opponent has no idea, like it's a complete neutral pick. It's going back to the early days of World Arena, where you would pick Fallen Cecilia on 1, and it was just like a safe, unpunishable, neutral pick. Not to say that you can't punish this character early in the draft, but because the character has the speed imprint, has the decent damage, and is insanely tanky, you can basically completely mask your draft. First pick Fallen Cecilia does not mean turn 2 anymore. It literally could be aggro, it can be cleave. You can just pivot out into something else, and I think that is such an insanely strong thing, and it's why I think these buffs are going to make this character meta. I don't know if she will be like super OP, but I'd be very, very shocked with these changes, as well as the best imprint in the game doesn't propel her to some sort of usage in World Arena. Maybe even used in things like Guild Wars or a regular arena, which are not really my forte. But for World Arena, I think Cecilia is back on the menu. Next up, let's move on to Remnant Violet, character that is, you know, I'm not like always a super big fan of this character. You have to get lucky, I feel like, most of the time when you play him, and then his damage, it's tied to penetration, so characters like Empyrean Illianav really tank it. And spoiler alert, DN, who we'll be talking about later in this patch, also tanks his damage overall. He got somewhat of a new lease on life last season because people were building him with almost no speed with Harsetti, right? But Harsetti's banned like 70% of the time in World Arena, so it's already a pretty niche character in a niche scenario. So people were building him kind of slow with Harsetti. Sure, people were theorizing maybe he might be pretty good with Lone Wolf Para, but so far from what I've seen, characters like Closer Charles, who just got a buff last balance patch, Bloodblade Corinne are much better with Lone Wolf Para. Even Fallen Cecilia, who we just talked about, probably still better with Lone Wolf Para than Remnant Violet is going to be, even with these changes. Anyways, let's talk about what they actually are here. 50% combat readiness increase on Massacre, right? And the damage dealt is increased. I guess that's to offset the fact that you're not going to be getting the penetration pretty much all the time. They're kind of realizing, I think, maybe Imperial Lab's a little bit too strong, so they're trying to give more damage to pen characters as a result. Massacre, if your opponent doesn't have pen resist, obviously still hits like a absolute truck. This is the second time I think they've increased the damage over it. And then the 50% combat readiness when you use it obviously is meant to be used in tandem with Lone Wolf Para. Like, that's kind of what they're there for, right? They want you to go press S3 with Para, give Rampage and Swift Attack to Remnant Violet, so he's like 90% dodge rate. He gets the CR push, and then you use S3, and he basically gets 2 turns. Like, he gets to go S3, oh look, Swift Action, it's my turn again. Press S1, the old blue Kisei combo, but I don't know if it's enough, right? I think this might be kind of interesting to see. Maybe it pans out, maybe it doesn't. I've just never been a fan of dodge characters unless they are somebody like Afternoon Soak Flan, where it's just like, it's so massively overtuned. Maybe this is overtuned, but for me, I just see it as cool, better synergy with Para, but it's, what if Para gets banned, then you're just stuck with Remnant Violet with like somewhat of a CR push. It doesn't really inspire confidence. Like, it's one of those things where if you have Para underneath ban protection, and then you're taking him 4-5, in which case he gets post-banned anyway, I just don't really think that this does a whole heck of a lot. I don't think that outside of like Flag Arena or maybe like Guild War offense, you're gonna really get to see these changes be super impactful for most players. Next up, we move on to Red Lilius here. So this is a both genius set of changes, I think, for this character, and also somewhat baffling. So the main change here is actually on the S2. That's far enough. Previously, Follow Me Charge, which is the S1, and Ready Load Fire, which is the S3, those had 50% critical hit chance when attacking baked into it. They took those components off the S1 and S3 and moved them onto the S2, which is baffling because New Moon Luna and Archdemon Shadow are being played nearly every single game. They'll just seal the Lilius, and then you just lose damage for fun? Like, I don't know why we did that change. That's very, very weird to me, right? But that's far enough now dispels all debuffs from the caster every single time an enemy uses a non-attack skill, which cannot be understated. That is very, very powerful. How people would try to play through this before is they would just kind of try to brute force it like Edward Elric, where they would hit you with so many debuffs and every non-attack skill would get rid of one debuff, and it's like, oh, well, you've got like 7. So like, what's the difference between 7 and 6? No big deal, right? Now, if you ever press, the character snaps out of it, and that's super huge because Ready Load Fire is a full team-wide cleanse. That's very, very strong. This basically makes her a nearly uncontrollable cleanser, like your hand guys, like your Liaison Sweet Miracle, right? And that inherently is always going to have some amount of value. I think that gives her some kind of niche, especially because, like, if you want to take a character like Designer Lilibet, for example, that takes up a actual DPS slot. Lilius is on a pretty decent stat line to be a tank, so if you want her to be your Aureus holder and also your cleanser, you can kind of compartmentalize it. Like, you don't have to take Lie as my cleanser, Crow as my tank. I can literally be like, I take Lilius because Lilius is both of these things at once, and therefore I don't have to dedicate another pick in the draft. I can take this on like pick 2 and feel pretty good about it, right? The suppression thing, right, still works only once every 2 turns like it did before. The other big change here is going to be on Ready Load Fire. They increase the damage of the move, and when the target is provoked, which is what, the quasi, activated skill, I guess this is like a non-attack skill portion of the passive actually does, right? So they use a non-attack skill, then you get a barrier, and you also provoke the person that used the non-attack skill once every 2 turns. If they get provoked, then yes, Ready Load Fire does bonus damage. So sure, I guess that is fine. And I guess this leads us into the exclusive equipment here, which is they made it so instead of doing 20% more damage on Ready Load Fire, it's kind of like they gave you this damage that's on the EE option number 3. It's like they baked it already into the Ready Load Fire changes, right? With the target being provoked, the damage goes up, the base damage goes up, so they don't feel like you need this anymore. And instead, they give you exclusive equipment option number 3 now gives immunity on the shield portion, the non-tactical portion of your S2. Cool, I guess. Like, everyone I know is already playing the CR push, or if you're a weirdo like me, you're playing the S1 lifesteal version on your Aureus tank, because if you build her with 50% crit while also building her tanky, you can just kind of sustain your Aureus Knight indefinitely, and it's a strategy I used to win a lot of games versus Harseti last season, right? So I don't really see a reason people already didn't play this one unless they were trying to cleave, right? And yeah, I don't think this one does anything for them. Honestly, I would have preferred they left the original exclusive equipment, because for the people who actually do play Red Lilius Cleave, they already needed help in the damage department anyway, right? If you're going to increase the base damage, taking this away, I think kind of just decreases the overall team comps that you can play with the character. So yeah, like I said, Lilius just overall is a very weird one. I think these changes are mostly good if you don't play into Luna and Archdemon Shadow, right? But those characters being so heavily played, so common, makes me think that maybe these Lilius buffs aren't very good. I really, really wish that they had kept this critical hit chance of 50% baked into the S1 and S3 like it was previously. I think that's just like not a good change. Next up, we have Diene. Diene has pretty much been one of these characters that, since the start of the game, has been very, very good. She kind of comes and goes. There'll be metas where she's the best character in the game. Then she'll go away for like a year and then just won't be usable at all. And then as time goes on, she'll get a buff and then she becomes insane again. So the question now is, are Diene's buffs enough to make her very good? Because the thing is, the only like really, really good Soul Weavers currently in World Arena are the ones that can hard carry a game, like a Death Deal Array or like a Fene, or they just have a ridiculous passive that lets you stabilize and anchor your entire draft around, like Blood Moon Haste, for examples, right? So I don't know if DN's changes that we're going to be talking about are enough to do that, because like even a character like Ruel, who is a ridiculous Guild War defense and like arena defense character, like just an absolutely silly character after her changes, she's still kind of fringe in World Arena. So let's talk about what DN got here. So they made it so that Blessings of the Goddess is the S2. It no longer dispels 2 debuffs, and instead it gives attack buff to the entire team. And that's because the S3 now no longer gives attack buff, but still gives the critical hit resistance and dispels all debuffs from it. So it is, the S3 is now a full cleanse. You still get the critical hit resistance, and you also get penetration resistance for 3 turns, which is massive. That basically gives you a better version of Empyrean Illinab's passive on DN, a character that most players have, right? This is I think a really huge change. So DN is not only now a full cleanse, but also a counterpick to a lot of very powerful damage dealers in the entire game. And honestly, the overall changes are very good for the character, because the optimal way to play the character has always been to go S2, right, for the CR push, then S3, and then you have S2 back up again, and then you S2, and then you have only 1 turn of just using S1 before you have your cooldowns back up, right? You're kind of cycling going S2, S3, S2, S1, S2, S3, S2. So that was kind of like always the loop. But the thing is, if you needed the protection of the critical hit resistance and you needed the damage to set up your DPS, it made for some very awkward turn cycling. Now, with these changes, you're going to be able to kind of keep that optimal loop, especially DN, who's one of the faster Soul Weavers that you can play. Like, she's not going to be like Frida, Ahmed fast, but like you can very easily push like 260, 270 with DN if you really want to. Like, you won't have an incredible bulk or incredible ER, but you could absolutely do that if you want to, right? And I suspect there will be people who play very aggressively or even try to cleave with the character, right? These are, again, just, it's overall a better kind of play pattern for the character. So this is really good. And again, kudos to them for giving the increased penetration resistance on the S3, because a lot of people skipped Empyrean Illinab, I feel like. And now that people know cat's out of the bag just how insane that character is, having a budget option that's a bit easier to get, especially when we're kind of due for a custom group summon, right? This is a good way for them to basically throw the community a bone, give them access to something that's very powerful that a lot of players need. And then for the new people who came in with the Dash Pass event, right, you're potentially going to be getting a banner, right, with this character with her changes. And if she's very good, it's, you know, very lucrative for them, because like you'll want to spend resources on it, right? Very good set of changes overall for DN. How good, again, in World Arena, I don't know, because you need to be like Death Deal Array, Blood Moon Haste levels of ridiculous for a Soul Weaver to have an impact in that game mode. But I suspect, you know, for the large majority of the player base who's not like super cutthroat, super diehard for World Arena, this is going to be an excellent character for you to take into specific Guild War defenses or even like arena defense, right? So that's pretty much it for DN. Now we come to Crow, and I've got a lot of things to say here about Crow. Let's talk about what he actually got first before I get into my, I jump up on my soapbox and give my little like speech here. So they have changed Summon Siegfried, which is the S3, right? So now Summon Siegfried has built-in lifesteal, right? In case you guys don't know how Summon Siegfried works, essentially nearly the same amount of HP that Crow is missing is how much it does, right? So if he has 28k max HP and he's currently at 2000 HP, he does about 25, almost 26k damage, right? That's kind of how the character works. So having lifesteal on that means that he not only is going to secure the kill, but he's going to be able to sustain himself, much like Green Yulha. This is a change where it's like, okay, well, Yulha had it. When does Crow actually get it? And then you can see here he also has this other like semi-passive component to Summon Siegfried. When this skill is available according to cooldown count, receives 25% of damage suffered by all allies in their place. When more than one damage sharing effect is granted, only the strongest effect is applied. This is basically Escort. This is Aureus. They just baked it into the character. Soul burn for the cost of 10 souls. Damage decreases the damage dealt because Summon Siegfried then becomes an AoE attack, which is a bonker soul burn. We don't know how, like, what the damage is going to look like, right? But needless to say, if they make it so that the character goes from 20, like, you know, the 26k damage that we talked about in the example, if that still does like 18 or 20k, that's an absolutely ludicrous change. I expect that they'll probably make it so it cuts the damage in half, right? Whatever the damage is, it probably gets cut in half. That's probably my best guess, because even at half damage, right, that's still like a Last Rider Crow S3 like fully ramped up, right, in terms of damage. It might even be a third of the damage. I would really want to see the multipliers on this. So yes, this is obviously a very good change for the character, because being able to have a character that sits there and hold Arius, and you know, that always provides value for your team. But having Arius baked in means that you can take Adamant Shield, which makes him just an absolute wall, completely tanks the damage that your team is going to be taking. He can also hold a ton of utility artifacts, Holy Sacrifice, which nearly guarantees summon Siegfried. You can play Bastion of Perlucia for the buff stacking. There's a lot of things you can do with a knight that, you know, inherently already has Arius caked into the kit. It's very, very powerful as an effect, and even though it's only this one change, I do think this will be enough to make Crow see a decent chunk of play in a lot of different game modes. Maybe not top tier, maybe not as good as Fallen Sister, but definitely looks like it would be a good set of changes. Now, this brings me to my little side tangent here. So the previous balance patch back in December, that had Closer Charles on it, right? And that was a hero that was slated to be buffed by the Awakened Potential update that was scrapped in late 2023. And here we have Crow, right? And if you remember, Crow was the character that they talked about giving a bunch of changes for the Awakened Potential update. And those changes were basically the ones that we're talking about here. So this is why, like, one of the examples of why I don't understand the logic of, you know, people not wanting nerfs, right? People, like, they just don't want to nerf stuff in this game, and people don't actually want nerfs for characters in this game, right? I personally think that Awakened Potential was a pretty good change for the game, except for the imprint situation, right? Needing, you know, to get imprints for every new character that came out, that would have made the game super pay to win, would have completely killed it. But the idea behind, you know, giving characters these buffs that were locked behind new content that we could explore, that was a pretty good set of changes, in my opinion. I feel like a lot of players in this game, they don't want their favorite heroes nerfed because they feel really attached to those characters, and they don't want those characters to be useless. The problem with that is that the designers, they need to make heroes in this game that you're going to want to roll for or spend money on, and they're going to want to make content that replaces the old content you're already playing. This is how they keep you engaged with a live service game. If you won't freely let them adjust the game as they want with things like nerfs or things like Awakened Potential, the alternative is that they're just going to power creep the game anyway and make all of your old characters that you were attached to useless, right? Think about characters like, you know, Navy Captain Landy, who was at one point one of the most busted characters in the entire game. She's nearly useless in most forms of PvP, right? Now you're probably thinking that the character needs a nerf. You know, with the advent of like Lone Wolf Peyra, I'm starting to feel like even Conqueror Elias is just, you know, who used to be a terror of the game for literal years, doesn't even feel like she's super relevant in the current state of the game. So yes, the player base canceled Awakened Potential, but it's still going to arrive nonetheless, whether you want it or not. So this is why I never understand the argument of, I don't want things to be nerfed, because if you don't nerf it, you're just going to wait like a year and change, and the character that you were afraid to get nerfed isn't going to be usable anyway, because they're still going to just force the changes or power creep through, whether you realize it or not. Anyways, let's move on now to, I guess, his exclusive equipment and Ludwig. I don't really think this exclusive equipment changes a whole hell of a lot. It just makes it consistent, right? Before, when you defeated somebody with Siegfried, you'd get 2 skill cooldown. They changed it to 1 because obviously AoE Horse probably going to be pretty insane. So Ludwig is just at this point overshadowed by his ML counterpart. And why wouldn't he be? Because they're almost the same exact kit, right? Previously, how Green Ludwig would work is you would just kind of use his S2, and then if you got another turn, then you would S3 and win the game. So Eternal Wanderer Ludwig is literally just, oh, well, I just S2 with a soul burn, and then I get the extra turn instantly, and then I win the game. So it's not like too different of a play pattern, honestly. Whoever the designer is for Ludwig, they keep like buffing this character and doing the same thing over and over with this character. I feel like the guy who keeps buffing Ludwig or suggesting the kit for ML Ludwig is the same guy that keeps buffing Melissa, because it's like they just so badly want to force through this one exact, like, very narrow, very niche design space. And it's like, well, how can we make it, you know, really strong without making it obviously busted? Right? And I used to say whenever Ludwig was on these patches, like, oh, you just give him soul burn extra turn. That's what they did with ML Ludwig. And I was like, okay, finally the meme is complete, right? The ML version is just the thing that Ludwig needed all along. So this one isn't quite there yet. It's a change. I think Ludwig is actually like somewhat usable. Like KJ uses him to cleave from time to time in Legend RTA. And every once in a while you see somebody like Elvmage dust him off. But just look at the changes here, right? Before, it was when you use the S2, if the target was stunned, he would get 50% CR, which is like halfway there to being able to go S3 wombo combo, win the game. Now you just get the 50% CR no matter what. And then you could look, they changed the exclusive equipment. They gave him an attack buff, right, on his S2 instead of the damage being increased. And then the defense break is no longer conditional on the other exclusive equipment. Again, I don't think this really increases his usability. Like, if you already were cleaving with him, you know, sure. I think for most people, if you have Eternal Wanderer Ludwig, who's going to be on the coin shop pretty much tomorrow, if you're watching this video as it airs, and you have the 40 Galaxy coins, just get that character. That character is like brain dead easy to cleave with, and I think better in most scenarios for this. If I'm wrong, if you're a cleaver, because I'm certainly not an expert in cleave, if you think that there is something more to Ludwig that I'm missing, feel free to let me know down in the comment section below. And then finally, to kind of wrap up the characters here, we have Roz as well as Adventurer Roz. So they increase the damage for base Roz, not Adventurer Roz, up on X Slash. And then you could see here, Sword of the Air, that is his S3. It now gives defense buff to all allies, right? Before it only gave it to Roz. In year 6 of the game, new players, sure, just make their lives easier, make the S3 better. It's fine. Now let's talk about what's actually different here on Adventure Roz. So yes, you still get the S1 having the damage dealt increase. You get a damage dealt increased on Purifying Flame. You get more healing on Purifying Flame. How much? I don't really know. Purifying Flame already doesn't give like a ton of health. It gives like 1200 or 1500 in most cases, I feel like. I can't look it up because for some reason, you know, Cecilia bot doesn't have the damage multipliers. But from every time I've used it, it's always been like, at best, like 8% of his max health, something like that. So sure, bring on the increased healing. It makes Abyss a lot easier for those players that want to use it there. If it's like a ridiculous amount of healing, sure, then maybe he might have more World Arena usage or more usage elsewhere in other PvP game modes. And then they're changing 2 of his runes. The Solitude rune, now you get the shield on the backline slot as soon as they are at 50% or less health, as opposed to if they take more than 30% damage from a single target attack. So that's a huge change in my opinion, right? And the barrier lasts a whole turn longer. That's really, really good. I like this change a lot, right? I think this means that, you know, if you're like a mid-tier PvP player, somebody in like Master, Challenger, or like low champion, this adds a lot of value to the character there, right? Like, he's already like an underrated character. Like, he's not gonna be like top tier, but like he was certainly a usable tank. Like, every once in a while you'll see somebody bust out a Roz in World Arena, and it usually does pretty good. This actually helps him out immensely. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I think he's going to be like meta, but I think more people are willing to take a gamble on Roz when the barrier lasts longer and is significantly easier to trigger, right? Having backslot protection is very, very good. There's a reason people play things like Bastion or Perlucia. Just having the ability to protect a specific slot on the team very, very hard is very good. And unlike Dragon Bride Senya, who is an ML5, right? Like, everyone has access to Adventurer Roz, so that's super good. And then the Speed rune has made it so that the defense break chance on Roz is up from 60% to 85%. It is so funny because I talked to Kev Strife about this like, I want to say like 2 weeks ago or something on his stream, and he was literally saying, bro, I think the only thing Raz really needs is to make his defense break chance like 85%. He would be really good. And you know what? Maybe he is right, because there's always the looming threat of having your Aureus Knight double as like a DPS. And if you can nearly guarantee that it's a defense break, right? Like with the 15% chance, it's like 78 or 80% chance, right? Like that's a lot better than like the 50 something percent chance that you had before. Like it's less of a coin flip and more of a like it's almost going to happen, right? It's about as sure as like an ambitious tie win S3, right? If you manage to get the defense break, it might kill. So yes, there's probably some team comp with this that would be very, very good. So my thoughts are Raz isn't necessarily going to be like meta or anything. I think the game like Power Crate Rise is like way far gone, and this is not enough to help him catch up. But I could be wrong. Like there could very well be some like 230, 240 speed Razes with high F running around that can hold Aureus or some kind of other utility artifact, and people are using it to battery certain characters, like maybe like a BBK or maybe even like Navy Captain Landy. I think that would be really cool to see. So this is, I think, like not necessarily the best buff in the patch, but probably the most interesting one, because I think it has the largest gameplay implications because everyone has access to it, from new players to like, you know, super veterans, right? Everybody could probably find something interesting to test and tinker with this change to Adventurer Raz. All right, so to wrap up the video, let's talk about the two artifacts. First, let's start with Wings of Light and Shadow, which is Ilnav's artifact. My biggest problem with this thing has always been, as you can see here, when attacking, if a critical hit is made, it increases the damage of the next attack by 10 to 20%. So you just have an artifact on your knight that's like, oh, half the time it doesn't do anything because you have to take a turn and you're not getting any value on your first turn. Oh, I landed a crit. Okay, next turn, I get something. Characters in E7 have like 4 or 5 turns max before they're dead, or the game is just over, right? So like having an artifact that works on like 2 turns is just bad. Right? I just don't think it's very good. So what they did is they made it so that the damage dealt increases by 14%, up to 14%, always. And if you land a critical hit, the next attack can get up to another 8%. So yes, it's a damage increase overall by 2% if you have the thing maxed out, right? And you get some inherent value. My problem is, am I really playing this over like mature sunglasses, right? Basically what it comes down to is like mature sunglasses and this are kind of like a push when it comes to damage. Would you rather have the critical hit chance from Wings of Light and Shadow? Or would you rather have the damage mitigation from mature sunglasses? And for most nights, I feel like it's going to be the mitigation, but maybe that's my biases as a player because I like to play very tanky, very slow, very safe, right? So this is going to be like dealer's choice. I think it is a good set of changes. I just don't know if it's enough to make it a more lucrative option over like Victorious Flag or mature sunglasses for the knights that actually play those options. And then finally, we have Uberius' Tooth, and this is a very weird one. So previously, you would get kind of like bonus damage on your attacks if it was a single target attack on a warrior, and you would use it on like high attack characters. Right now, Inheritor Amiki is the best example, but like in the past, Arunka would use this, or even famously Huayong, like Red Huayong in her heyday was super broken with this artifact, right? So now they made it so that Uberius' Tooth is just after attacking, period. So what that means is AoE attacks now work with Uberius' Tooth when previously they didn't. And like I said, it's a weird one because you look at the characters that can actually like realistically want to use this that have AoEs. You have Kayn, Holiday Euphine, Benimaru's Hellflare, Immortal Wukong. Judge Kisei has 2 AoE attacks but has very poor base attack to, you know, pair with it. So yeah. And then you have also Straze, who probably isn't giving out like Benimaru's Tachi or like Portrait of the Saviors, Prelude to a New Era. I don't know if he's actually pairing, you know, playing that with over this one, right? I think my thoughts on this is that I think this is a quality of life update because we're not going to get another balance change until like April or so, right? So we have a limited character coming out, Tori, right? Maybe it is potentially for that, or maybe there's a collab that's going to come out like right before the next set of balance changes actually are set to hit. and they think that this change to the artifact is good with those collab characters. So that's my thought, right? This is just like future-proofing the artifact. Why not, right? Like, there's so few characters use it as single target. People are having really good success with like AoE characters like Bellion on 3F. Uberius' Tooth is basically the 3F, right? For attack scalers, why not just make it AoE? And if we have characters like with the release of episode 6, the new collab, this new Valentine's Limited that's coming, right? Maybe it works with those characters, and that's why they're making this change. That's pretty much my best guess, because otherwise, looking at the actual candidates, like it's Immortal Wukong and like Holiday Euphine. And other than that, I don't really know who else you would actually want to try it on. Anyways, those are all my thoughts on everything that is here in the patch. Let me know your thoughts on the February 13th balance adjustment down in the comment section below. And as always, enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week, and I'll catch you in the next one. Later now.